Coming up on Business Incorporated. Kenya agrees to lift ban on Ugandan poultry after bilateral talks. Africa Development Bank grants $1.5 million to Smart Africa Alliance for digital trade and e-commerce across Africa. IMF ready to start loan talks with Mozambique in January. Hello and welcome to the program. I'm Ladi Williams. First off, let's take a look at the markets. Begin with African markets, where 3 out of 4 major bourses that we track were mostly positive at intraday. In South Africa, the GSC was up 0.48%. Egypt's EGX 30 climbed 0.82%. On Nigeria's market, main index was slightly negative at 0.03%. Meanwhile, Kenya closed positive on Tuesday. And African equities have underperformed compared to global equity markets this year, but they've outperformed in emerging markets where China stocks have been dragged on performance. Now, for an in-depth analysis of key African markets, we have Rahul Shah, Head of Financials, Equity Research at Telema Research UK. Great to have you.
Hi, thanks very much for having me.
Yeah, so can you paint a picture of African equities markets performance for 2021?
Yeah, sure. Well, as you said, Laddie, it's been a good year, not spectacular. I mean, we advise global investors, so we look at returns in dollar terms. And on that basis, most markets have returned between 10 to 15%, which is good, a good performance. Not as good as the US, which was up 23%, but better, as you say, better than China, which declined this year.
All right. What about Nigeria? What most caught your eye this year in the Nigerian equities market?
Yeah, so Nigeria is always a difficult one for international investors. There have been limited structural reforms, high inflation, FX issues. But you still had a few stocks that did very well. One that I'd highlight is First Bank of Nigeria. This is a bank with fantastic distribution capacity in terms of branches and agents. But historically, it's had bad asset quality and poor corporate governance. In recent years, management have worked hard to fix the asset quality issues, and the central bank stepped in this year to address the corporate governance. And that's helped to attract some new investors, in particular, a high-profile investor like Femi Artudola. And that's helped the stock pop 75%. So it's had a very good year. Most of that return actually came in a few weeks in September and October. But, that's, I think, the standout performer in Nigeria.
All right, let's turn to the big one now, South Africa. What's your take on that market?
Yeah, I mean, on paper, it's had a reasonable year, up 17% in dollar terms. But how you did, I think, really depends on whether or not you had, on the one side, Prosus and Naspers in your portfolio, because they have basically declined quite heavily since February. And on the other side, you have a stock like MTM Group, which has basically been going up every day. It's up 150% for the year so far. So I think, if you manage to stay clear of Prosus and Naspers, you had a very good year. And actually, quite a few companies in South Africa have done well. Investex are up over 100%. Sasol's up over 75%. Even, commodity plays and hotel plays also did very well. So overall, a solid performance provided you managed to stay clear of those two tech names.
All right, let's head to the other side of the continent now. How was 2021 for Egyptian equities?
Yeah, so Egypt has basically been trading sideways, I'd say, this year. We're basically back to where we were in February. So we're up 10% for the year, so still decent, but there hasn't been much of a positive trend, unlike some of the other markets we just discussed. That's not to say that you couldn't get good performance out of Egypt. The one stock that's done very well is Mizza Fertilizers. It's up 60% this year in dollar terms. Basically, three things have worked in the favor of that stock. Firstly, as you know, as many of your viewers probably have noticed in their pocketbooks, food inflation has been very strong this year, and that's typically good for fertilizer companies because farmers want to grow more crops. Secondly, energy prices have gone up, which is normally bad for fertilizer players, but this company actually has subsidized feedstock, so it wasn't affected by that. And the third factor is that because of those high energy prices, some fertilizer companies actually cut back on production, and that also helped this company do well. So yeah, that's a name that's done well in Egypt.
All right, shifting focus to East Africa now. What happened in Kenya this year?
So Kenya's had a tricky few months. At one point, it was up 30% this year, but it's given up most of those gains in Q4. When you talk about Kenya, actually, you're basically talking about Safaricom. That's 60% of the index. And obviously, they're doing well in terms of mobile money and things like that. But they also ventured into Ethiopia this year. And given the problems in that country in recent months, that hasn't helped sentiment towards that stock. But one name that has done well in in Kenya, is Equity Group, which is one of the big banks there. They're growing their loan book around 20%. The asset quality is improving. And they also, interestingly, they also recently branched out into DRC, the Democratic Republic of Congo. And that's a huge country with a lot of potential, and management has some high hopes for that investment. So I think Safaricom is having difficulties at the moment, but fundamentally there are still some strong stories in Kenya.
All right, Raul, thanks for that tour. Any other markets worth highlighting?
Yeah, I think there's three that I'd mention. Firstly, Ghana has had a standout year, so that really has had a strong year. One of the names there is MTN Ghana, up 80%. So that's been, I think, the standout performer on the continent. Second market to flag would be Morocco. It looks expensive, but that hasn't held back the stocks this year. One name to flag is La Belvie. It's a food retailer. It's up 50%. And then the third market to flag, I'd say, is Mauritius. Again, up high teens. With the vaccine rollouts taking place globally, that's obviously good for its tourism industry. A name I'd flag there is MCB Group. It's the largest bank in Mauritius, and it's up around 25% this year.
All right, quite interesting. But what does 2022, have in store for African equity markets looking forward?
Sure, yeah, well, that's the big question. I think it pays to be positive. Obviously, Africa kind of lagged the vaccine rollout this year, but that's definitely going to improve in 2022. But more importantly, company earnings are growing quite strongly across the continent, and valuations are not that aggressive in a historical context. They're actually quite cheap. So the fundamental basis for equities is strong. That's not to say it's going to be a smooth ride. Various things could go wrong. From a global perspective, you could see some policy errors in the US or China or Europe that could affect African equities. And closer to home, I think what's going to be important is commodity prices and currency devaluation risks. But yeah, overall, I think it's good time to be invested in the market, and I'd say it's better to be invested than seeing inflation erode the value of your savings. So yeah, we have a positive view on the market.
All right, Raul, I guess traders will be getting ready for that 2022 ride. Thank you so much, Raul Shah, Head Financial Equity Research at Telema UK. Always great to talk to you. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
All right, now let's move on to the Middle East, where markets were mostly mixed at intraday. In the United Arab Emirates, Dubai's index declined most by 1.06%, while the Abu Dhabi index lost about 0.93%. Also in the region, Saudi Arabia's index gained 0.46%, while the Qatari index was also positive, 0.26% up at intraday. All right, to Europe now. Other than COVID, another issue making the rounds is the first phone call between Xi Jinping and Germany's new Chancellor, Olaf Scholz, making the rounds. Let's hear more now from Daniel Winter right there in Berlin. Great to have you, Daniel. Well, what does China want from Germany's new government?
Well, according to the state broadcaster in China, CCTV, and its international station, CGTN, Xi Jinping, the president of China, called for dialogue on regional issues and hopes to avoid a so-called Cold War mentality. And also, he said that he's looking forward to the 50th anniversary of relations between West Germany, as it was then, and China. But one point sticks out in particular in the fact that Xi Jinping called for a fair, level playing field for Chinese companies operating in Germany, which marks a reversal of how diplomatic tensions have increased in recent years, as German companies have complained about not having a fair playing field when it comes to operating in China. There's all kinds of restrictions which they operate under there, and the EU even tried to resolve this with a comprehensive agreement on investment, which still hasn't been signed. Now, that aimed to create a level playing field for EU companies in China, but that failed. Now, Chinese companies, meanwhile, have been free to operate in the EU and have even bought up shares and even entire companies, even in strategic industries in some cases, without much hindrance. So it's interesting to hear the reversal coming from Xi Jinping there. But yes, it all depends, whether these two countries can come together in the near future, because there's a new government here, and so there's a lot still on the table.
All right, so what's the current state of China-Germany relations?
Well, it's interesting to note that Chinese state media covered this in quite a bit of detail through CCTV, which is their state broadcaster, and CGTN, the international arm, have released reports on this with quotes from both sides, whereas the German Chancellery simply released a statement saying that the conversation had taken place, which may indicate that the German Chancellery doesn't have a detailed China policy as yet. They have probably a broad stance, but they don't have anything worked out in detail that they're ready to communicate with the public at the moment. Now, Angela Merkel, the previous chancellor, was always fairly lukewarm on China. She was never particularly effusive in praise nor extremely harsh with her criticism, whereas the EU and other nations have been a lot more outspoken against China when it comes to unfair practices, repression of or suppression of media and journalists there, or treatment of the Uyghur minority in China as well. However, the new foreign minister that we have here in Germany, Annalena Baerbock, is a lot more China critical. So it will be interesting to see whether it's her impassioned determinism which determines the relationship with China, or whether it's Olaf Scholz's calm contemplation. At the moment, it's hard to tell which narrative will guide the relationship in the coming years.
All right, Daniel, tell me now, what are the chances of an improvement in relations?
Well, there's definitely a possibility, let's put it that way, because, of course, at the moment, Olaf Scholz wants to have a positive relation with China and hopes to have a good connection. But the Chinese government has often been unpredictable in its moves and has clearly seen to extend its power and influence across the world. And so whether that becomes incompatible with German interests remains to be seen. Is China currently at the peak of its ambitions, or does it want to push further? That will really be the deciding factor when it comes to the relationship between Germany and China. There's a long road ahead, of course, and plenty of challenges. How will China behave towards Taiwan? Will there be an escalation in the disagreement, the tensions between those two nations? And if so, what side does Germany stand on? Will it be determined and resolute, or Will it want to see just a calm balance restored, which I think will be the direction it would take that in? And what if China becomes an increasingly hostile environment for German companies to do business? There's so many questions that are on the table right now, and with a new government which hasn't been extremely outspoken on its position on China, it's extremely hard to tell. But they will be hoping for a positive future and positive relations between China and Germany.
All right, that's Daniel Winter there, right there in Berlin. Thank you so much, Daniel. So moving on, stock futures were muted today in early trading. Major averages rebounded from a three-day losing streak spurred by fears about the Omicron COVID variant. Dow Jones Industrial Average futures hovered about 0.02% higher. S&P 500 futures inched 0.1% lower, and NASDAQ 100 futures slipped 0.23%. Now, let's get yesterday's close from our correspondent, Maria Bird.
The U.S. stock market showed a sharp increase on Tuesday as the S&P 500 is up 1.8%, the Dow Jones 1.6%, and the NASDAQ is at 2.4% increase. It is clear that the Omicron variant is putting the U.S. stock market in a seesaw effect. Many investors are concerned about the supply chain issues, which is leading to inflation. Even though the U.S. has not yet been able to have the $1 trillion social services plan for the Build Back Better plan by President Biden pass, many investors are hopeful that in 2022, some portion of the plan will be passed by Congress.
That's our correspondent there, Maria Bird, right there in the U.S. All right, after the break, we take a look at more African stories on the continent. That's in a moment. Do stay with us. Welcome back. Still watching Business Incorporated live on Channels Television. Now to our next conversation. We turn our focus to Sub-Saharan Africa, home to more than 1 billion people, half of whom will be under 25 years of age by 2050, a diverse continent offering human and natural resources that have the potential to yield inclusive growth and eradicate poverty in the region. Let's look at the economic performance of Sub-Saharan Africa in 2021 with Ibukun Moyeni, Economies with Vectiva Research. Great to have you on the program.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, so 2021, a year characterized still by the coronavirus with more variants, inflationary pressures. How would you describe growth in the region for 2021? Can we call it a recovery?
So definitely in 2021, what we've seen is that the pandemic has created a favorable base for economics to actually deliver unusual growth. So this is why we have seen record levels of growth in Nigeria. We saw growth at around 5% in Q2, and we saw around 4% in Q3. It feels like South Africa actually had challenges due to the unrest and, of course, the impact of the pandemic on South Africa. But looking at the region as a whole, the IMF expects the region to expand by 3.7% in 2021 and to further strengthen to 3.8% in 2022. For the region as a whole, growth has been improving. Aside from these few risks, we've also seen some political upheavals here and there. There have been some coup d'etats, there have been some military takeovers. We've also seen the success of the political system in Zambia. So it's been a mix of both bittersweet. So looking into 2021, we can say that growth is underway. Inflation has particularly been high across these economies. Nigeria has been one of the very few economies to record constant disinflation. But even though Nigeria's inflation has been falling, if you look at the average inflation numbers for 2021, it's about 17.1, and we expect it to close at 16.9% on average by the time December inflation results is out. But if you compare 16.9% for 2021 to 13% for 2020, we discover that inflation is higher in 2021 than it was in 2020, despite the deceleration in inflation. So we could say that the inflationary touches are still there, and they could persist well into 2022, even though headline figures seems to be dropping, but the populace is going to continue to feel the impact of rising prices.
Right. Right. But, you know, looking at the region now, what countries stood out for you in terms of performance and attracting foreign direct investment?
Okay, well, when it comes to investment inflows, of course, a lot of economies were when you come to portfolio inflows, a lot of economies were on the sideline, and that was especially because of the fact that we were expecting the Fed to take a decision on tapering, right? If you look at in recent times, due to the expectation of higher U.S. yields, there's been, of course, a diversion of inflows into other assets, right? So looking at foreign direct investment, even for the likes of Egypt, Egypt has enjoyed more foreign portfolio investment than foreign direct investment, right? Foreign direct investment, even in Nigeria, in the years when we had foreign direct investment, we're basically into the fossil fuel industry. But you see concerns around ESG, concerns around climate change that is causing investors to invest in renewable energy. And that's actually what is driving investment inflows in 2021. So we say portfolio inflows have been buoyant in those economies that have strong fundamentals. But for the likes of Nigeria, you see that foreign investors have been shy of those of Naira assets, even though there's been some uptick in the OMO yields. That's because of the foreign exchange issues we have in the country, as a result of relatively lower yields than African peers. But again, it's a game of a trade-off, right? Because for economies with high and attractive yields, they might have issues with debt servicing. Look at Ghana, for example, look at Kenya, for example. These countries have debt issues, right? Their debt to GDP is quite high. For Nigeria, is low. It's just debt servicing to revenue that is actually the issue in Nigeria, and that might actually moderate because revenue is going to improve in 2022. So that's going to be a major challenge that we look at looking into 2022. So investors are going to be wary of SSA assets because of the repricing of assets ahead of the rate hikes in the US, as well as monetary policy normalization by advanced economies. We've seen the UK hike interest rates, and the US Fed is saying it's going to speed up its pace of tapering asset purchases. These factors are going to influence SSA assets negatively. But once the market is able to absorb that, we could see commodity prices becoming a key driver of SSA performance.
All right, Tibuko. Well, we'll keep watching and see how the 2022 plays out for the region. Ibukun Omoyeni, economist with Veteva, thank you for coming on the program.
Thank you for having me.
All right, moving on now. Nairobi has agreed to lift barriers that hinder the sale of poultry products from Uganda. Move that would also see Kampala delay its proposed retaliation ban on Kenya's agricultural produce. This follows bilateral talks held between agriculture ministers from both countries. In a joint communique, two neighboring countries said they would not impose restrictions on poultry as they work out a long-term policy deal to eliminate trade barriers. The sale of poultry products has been the most contentious in a long-standing trade spat. It also includes a ban on Uganda dairy products in Kenya since 2019. And the board of directors of the Africa Development Bank Group has approved a $1.5 million grant to assess policy gaps in the digital trade and e-commerce ecosystems in 10 countries in Africa. The funds sourced from the Africa Development Fund, the bank's concessional window, will go to the Smart Africa Alliance, an alliance of 32 African countries, international organizations, and global corporations with a vision to create a single digital market in Africa by 2030. The project will study the policy environment in 10 countries, including Cote d'Ivoire, Benin, Ghana, Liberia, Uganda, South Sudan, Zimbabwe, the Republic of Congo, Sao Tome and Principe, and the Democratic Republic of Congo. Smart Africa will consult public and private sector actors about developing an online training program that will directly benefit 600 stakeholders. And that's it on Business Incorporated. Thank you so much for watching. Compliments of the season.